The first sound I registered was a flat beep, distant, cold, rhythmic. Then came voices, faint, professional, detached. She was lucky if the airbags hadn't deployed. CT shows swelling in the temporal lobe. We've induced a coma to reduce pressure. I wanted to scream, to open my eyes, to tell them I was in here. But I couldn't move. My body was heavy, disconnected. My brain floated somewhere between memory and machinery. Then came their voices. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming so quickly," the doctor said. Douglas Carter, my father, or the man I called father, replied with his usual tight-lipped control. "What happened?" "Miss Carter was struck by a drunk driver. Her car flipped twice. Traumatic brain injury. We've stabilized her vitals, but the next 24 hours are critical." A pause. "And what kind of costs are we talking about?" That was Susan, my mother. Clipped tone, like she was asking about dry cleaning delays. "We'll need insurance authorization," the doctor said. "She's listed you both as emergency contacts." Susan's voice shifted, lower, colder. "There's been a misunderstanding. Rachel isn't our biological daughter, not technically our responsibility." A longer pause now. "I'm sorry?" the doctor asked. Douglas cleared his throat. "She was adopted, informally. There was never a finalized legal process. We raised her, but—" "You're not understanding," Susan interrupted. "She's not really our daughter. We don't owe her anything." And just like that, they were gone. No authorization, no consent, no love, just silence. Then retreating footsteps. A door opening. A door closing. I wanted to scream, to thrash, to make them stay. But my body remained frozen. I was awake, but voiceless. Alive, but discarded. The next time I opened my eyes fully, a woman with a kind voice and tired eyes was leaning over me. "Hey, Rachel," she whispered. "It's Jenna, your night nurse. Can you hear me?" I blinked. Once, twice. Relief rushed over her face. "You're back." 3 weeks later, I sat upright in my hospital bed, staring at the envelope the lawyer had just handed me. It had my name on it, written in the familiar, looping script of my grandmother, Eleanor Carter. She had died just before the accident, and this was the letter she never got to give me in person. Inside were documents, legal ones, birth records, adoption certificates, financial papers, and a letter. "My dearest Rachel, I promised I'd tell you the truth when you were ready, but I ran out of time. You were born to my niece Caroline. She was young, scared, and alone. I thought placing you with Susan and Douglas would keep you safe and loved, but I was wrong." I had to stop reading. My vision blurred with rage and grief. My entire life had been built on a lie they denied, even after I begged for truth, a lie they used to justify leaving me to die. "You okay?" Naomi asked, bringing me a cup of bitter hospital coffee. I nodded. "They lied to the doctors. They told them I wasn't their daughter." She didn't look surprised. She'd seen enough of my parents' coldness over the years. "They're challenging the will," she added. "They filed for emergency guardianship 2 days after the crash." "Let them try," I said. My voice didn't shake. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "That confident?" I opened the folder again and held up the documents. The adoption was legal, finalized, binding. They lied to everyone, including themselves. Back at my apartment, well, Naomi's guest room, really, I laid everything out across the floor. Hospital footage, lawyer transcripts, estate papers. The truth wasn't just emotional anymore. It was digital, legal, evidential. "Security cameras in the ICU caught the whole conversation," Jenna had said. "It's on the server. If you want it." I wanted it. I watched it once. Then I watched it again. There was my father's voice. "She's not our daughter." There was my mother's. "We owe her nothing." I transferred the footage onto a secure drive, backed it up to cloud storage, sent copies to Mark Callahan, my attorney, sent another to myself. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd tried to erase me, but I kept receipts. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. 3 years ago, I sat at that same table across from Susan and Douglas. I had just announced our Series B funding round. $18 million raised for a medical AI platform I built from the ground up. You always were determined to prove yourself, Susan had said with that faint, bitter smile. Is that what you think this is? I had asked. Most adopted children become overachievers, Douglas added. It's textbook. That was the first time I realized. They had never let go of the idea that I didn't belong. Now I watched from my laptop as they approached Grandmother Eleanor's house. Susan jiggled the locked door handle. Douglas swore under his breath. They weren't expecting the locks to be changed. They weren't expecting a letter waiting on the table. But I had left it, printed on Eleanor's monogrammed paper, with my signature at the end, and one sentence at the top, in bold. You said I wasn't your daughter. That makes this house mine. There are two kinds of betrayal. The kind you don't see coming, and the kind you've braced yourself for your whole life. Mine was both. But now I wasn't the scared girl trying to earn a place in their world. I was the woman who had built her own. Let them come. Let them try to claim what was never theirs. The only thing I owed them now was the truth. If you've ever been overlooked after giving your all, type 1. You're not alone. The first alert hit my phone at 1:58 p.m. Front door motion detected, Eleanor residence. I tapped the live feed. The security cameras blinked to life, and there they were, Douglas and Susan Carter, pulling into the driveway in their black Mercedes, Alyssa quietly trailing behind. Susan was in full country club mode, pearls, a powder blue blazer, and that tightly pinned smile that had always meant trouble. Douglas looked impatient, checking his watch like this entire process was beneath him. Alyssa, in a gray coat too big for her frame, looked unsure, like she didn't know whether she was walking into a house or a storm. Naomi sat beside me on the couch, laptop open, watching another camera angle. They're right on schedule. They always are, I said. Timing is their only consistent skill. Inside the house, everything was set. The dining room was spotless, freshly polished hardwood, a lace table runner Eleanor used for holiday dinners, and in the center, under soft light from the chandelier, sat a single envelope, cream-colored. My name written on the front in Eleanor's handwriting, forged lovingly by her lawyer, using an old birthday card for reference. They had no idea. This key isn't working, Douglas snapped, jiggling the handle. Did you give me the wrong one? Susan tried hers. Ridiculous. I'll call the estate manager. Try the back door, Alyssa suggested. I'm not sneaking into my mother's house through the back, Douglas grumbled. They circled the house until a locksmith arrived, someone our legal team had already briefed. Papers signed, lock disengaged, and then they were inside. Everything looks untouched, Alyssa said, running a finger along the banister. Her voice echoed slightly, like she never left. Of course it's untouched, Susan muttered. Rachel hasn't been here, probably too busy planning a sob story in court. Douglas moved through the kitchen, opening drawers, scanning the silver. She even left the china, he said. Because it's not hers, Susan snapped. We raised her. We made sacrifices. You left her, Alyssa interrupted, voice firmer. You left her in that hospital and said she wasn't your daughter. The air froze. Douglas turned, sharp. You weren't there. You don't know what that moment felt like. No, Alyssa said. But I saw the video. She sent me the link. Your voices are clear. We were in shock, Susan said flatly. You sounded calm to me, Alyssa replied. Calm and cruel. They entered the dining room. Susan's eyes zeroed in on the envelope. What's this? Douglas picked it up. It's addressed to Rachel. Then she shouldn't have left it here, Susan said, snatching it and tearing it open before anyone could protest. On my screen, I watched her lips move as she read the first lines, then freeze. The color drained from her face. What is it? Douglas asked. She handed him the letter without a word. He read faster than she did, impatient, aggressive. This is outrageous, he hissed. Alyssa reached for it. Douglas hesitated. I'm family too, she said sharply. Or do you only say that when it's convenient? She began to read. Naomi leaned in, whispering, Now we watch them burn. The camera caught everything. Alyssa's expression darkening as she read my account of being gaslit as a child, my memories of being told to be grateful, the hospital scene they thought no one had heard. Then she found the QR code. She lifted her phone, clicked, and the video played. Douglas's voice cold and sharp. "She's not our daughter. Susan's. We owe her nothing." Alyssa's shoulders slumped. "You left her to die." "She's dramatizing," Douglas snapped. "Is she?" Alyssa asked. "Because the court documents are here too. Legal adoption, finalized. She is your daughter." "She's your half-sister," Susan snapped back. That stopped everyone, even Douglas. Alyssa blinked. "You really never saw her as family." In my apartment, I felt something loosen inside me, a thread cut clean. Alyssa sat down hard on Eleanor's floral chair, the letter still in hand. "All those years, I thought she was just the overachiever, the ice queen. I didn't realize she was surviving you two." "She had every advantage," Douglas said. "We gave her—" "You gave her nothing real," Alyssa said. "You gave her rules, silence, expectations. You gave me love. And look what she's doing with it," Susan spat. "Tearing us apart." "No," Alyssa said, standing. "You did that." "Where are you going?" Douglas asked. "To my apartment." "You're overreacting. Don't call me, I need space." She left. No drama, no threats, just truth. Back on screen, Susan stood in the wreckage. "She'll use this," she whispered. "The footage, the letter. She'll destroy us in court." Douglas started pacing. "We'll call Gerald. We'll say we were disoriented. Misunderstood." "The video shows us calm, Douglas." "Deep fakes, that's our angle." Susan rubbed her temples. "This is a nightmare." They spent the next hour rummaging for sentimental items, which just happened to be expensive. Crystal bowls, antique clocks, a watch Eleanor never even wore. I documented everything, every move, every lie. When they finally left, Naomi looked at me and said, "That's a wrap on Act 2. But we both knew the curtain was only rising. If you've ever watched someone reveal their true face, when they thought no one was looking, type 2. The truth always finds its way. The notification hit my inbox at 7:42 a.m. Subject line, "Urgent, temporary conservatorship motion, filed by Douglas and Susan Carter." I stopped mid-sip of my coffee. Filed. Not just threatened. Filed. Naomi, who'd just walked into the apartment with a bag of breakfast wraps, saw my face and froze. "What now?" I turned the screen toward her. "They're trying to get court-appointed control over me. Again." Her jaw clenched. "After abandoning you in a coma, they must be delusional." "No," I said, closing the laptop. "They're just consistent." 2 hours later, I sat across from Alyssa in a quiet corner of the cafe on Cambridge Street. She was already there when I arrived, 2 coffees on the table, 1 black with 1 sugar, exactly how I've taken it since high school. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," she said, pushing the cup toward me. "I wasn't sure if I'd stay," I answered honestly. She winced. I deserve that. We sat in silence for a long moment. "I watched the video again," she finally said, voice soft. "They didn't even hesitate. They weren't crying. They didn't seem confused. Just cold." "That wasn't new to me," I replied. "Just new to you." Alyssa nodded. "When we were kids, I always thought they were just stricter with you because you were older, or because you were smarter. I never understood." "No one wanted you to," I said. "That's how silence works." Back at Naomi's, the war room came alive. My lawyer, Mark Callahan, called in from his office. "They're arguing that your injuries make you legally incompetent to manage your affairs." I laughed, bitter. "I've been signing contracts from this laptop for weeks." "And every physician you've worked with agrees you're fully lucid," he replied. "But they're trying to preempt the estate ruling by muddying your capacity." "Can we counterclaim with hospital footage?" Naomi asked. "We already have," Mark said. "And Rachel, there's something else. They're trying to reach your former therapist, the one you stopped seeing after the accident." "To dig for weakness," I muttered. "To fabricate it," Naomi corrected. "They want to rewrite your trauma as instability." Mark added, We've subpoenaed the hospital records and Jenna Lee's witness statement. The video of your parents refusing treatment, framed with their own voices, will be the centerpiece. What about the adoption? I asked. They'll probably try to say Eleanor forced them into it. They already did, Mark said. But we've got signed court orders, legal filings, and your amended birth certificate. This isn't about legal truth anymore. It's about narrative warfare. The courtroom smelled like pine-scented furniture polish and old carpet. Rows of polished pew benches. A judge with reading glasses balanced halfway down his nose. Reporters were present. So were distant relatives who hadn't called me in years. Douglas and Susan sat 2 rows ahead of me, flanked by their lawyer Gerald Rothman, smiling like this was just another merger meeting. Susan wore black, as if this were a funeral. I suppose in a way, for them, it was. Alyssa sat with me. She hadn't spoken to our parents since the day at the house. I hadn't asked her to choose sides, but she had. I may have grown up in their house, she whispered, but I'm building my life in yours. That was the first time I almost cried that day. The arguments started predictably. Your Honor, Gerald began, standing, Mr. and Mrs. Carter have grave concerns for Rachel's mental and emotional well-being following a traumatic event. Her refusal to engage with them, coupled with her behavior, sending inflammatory letters, planting surveillance devices, denying access to the family home, suggests paranoia, instability. Mark stood before the judge could blink. We'll be submitting certified medical assessments from 5 attending physicians, stating that Ms. Carter is mentally and emotionally sound. Gerald interjected, but her emotional state was caused, Mark said sharply, by the actions of the very people now attempting to control her estate. He handed over a thumb drive. The footage on this drive documents Mr. and Mrs. Carter denying medical consent, while Ms. Carter lay in a coma. Their exact words, Your Honor, she's not our daughter. We owe her nothing. A murmur rolled through the courtroom like thunder rumbling in distant hills. Naomi took the stand next. Did Mr. Carter ever represent a competitor of your company in legal proceedings? Mark asked. Yes, she said. 3 years ago, during a patent dispute. Rachel confronted him, and he said, quote, family is one thing, business is another. So, when he says he's acting out of parental concern, he's protecting an investment, Naomi cut in. And he's bitter that he can't control Rachel's company or her legacy. Then came Jenna. Did the Carters provide medical consent? No, she answered, eyes steady. They explicitly refused. The doctor had to invoke emergency intervention. What was their tone during that exchange? Indifferent, borderline annoyed, as if she was an inconvenience. Back in the gallery, Susan was trembling, not with regret, with fury. Her eyes locked on mine like a sniper's scope, but I didn't flinch. When the judge finally ruled, his voice was firm. Conservatorship denied. There is no evidence to support incapacity. The footage presented demonstrates a disturbing pattern of emotional abandonment, not parental care. Then came the real blow. The court finds that Mr. and Mrs. Carter acted in bad faith and attempted to manipulate the judicial process for personal gain. The motion is not only denied, it is dismissed with prejudice. Gasps, scribbling reporters. Susan's fingernails digging into Douglas's sleeve. The gavel hit like a gunshot. Outside the courthouse, the sky had turned a strange shade of orange. Sunset, maybe, or fire from a distant storm. Alyssa and I stood on the steps while Naomi updated our legal team on the phone. I keep asking myself what I missed, Alyssa said, when we were growing up. You missed nothing, I said. You saw what they wanted you to see. And now? Now we show them who they raised. She glanced sideways. What if they retaliate? They already did, I said. This was their last shot. But I was wrong. That night, another letter arrived at Naomi's address. This one wasn't from them. It was from a new lawyer. Defamation claim, emotional distress, reputational damage. They were suing me. If you've ever had to defend your sanity just to protect your truth, type 3, we see you. The email hit my inbox at 9:14 a.m. The subject line read, Notification of lawsuit, Douglas and Susan Carter vs. Rachel Carter. The claim, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The basis? A personal letter I left in my grandmother's home, one that detailed the truth, one they had willingly opened. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. They're suing me for telling the truth, I said out loud. Naomi looked up from the stove. For telling it where they could hear it, that's what scares them. I clicked download, scrolled. Attached was the complaint. The plaintiff alleges emotional damages resulting from malicious, defamatory statements contained in the letter left at the deceased's residence. They were trying to twist my survival into slander. They were trying to punish me for choosing honesty over silence. Let them, I said finally. We're not playing defense anymore. A year after the accident, I hosted a dinner party in Eleanor's home, my home now. The Victorian had been restored but not remodeled. I kept the stained glass transoms, the creaky wood floors, the velvet banquette Eleanor had always loved. That night, the dining table was surrounded by the people who'd stayed. Naomi, with her new boyfriend, a calm-eyed public defender who adored her fire. Jenna, the nurse who once whispered to me in the coma, now working in private home care. Mark Callahan, my lawyer, bearing his usual gift, an overpriced bottle of Cabernet and dry wit. And Alyssa, my sister, biological and chosen, who now lived in the East Wing. As dessert was served, Naomi leaned in. Do you ever think they'll stop coming after you? No, I said, but I stopped waiting for them to change. That's enough. The defamation case didn't even make it to trial. The judge dismissed it with prejudice, writing in the ruling, truth cannot be defamatory, and abandonment cannot be reframed as parental discretion. The media picked it up. Headlines spread. Parents who refused to save daughter now sue her for writing it down. Their reputations sank like anchors. Their social circles collapsed. They sold the family home in Chestnut Hill and moved to Florida, quietly, disgracefully, and without a word to either of us. Are you okay? Alyssa asked the day we found out. I paused before answering. I think I am. Not because they were gone, but because I had stopped needing them to stay. My company, Equinox Systems, launched a new division that spring, BridgeMind, a communication platform for patients with traumatic brain injuries. It used biometric sensors to detect blink codes, track eye movement, and interpret minor neural responses, allowing patients to indicate pain, discomfort, or even preferences in real time. It would have changed everything for you, Jenna said when she saw the prototype. I smiled. It won't change the past, but it might rewrite someone else's. BridgeMind received early-stage federal funding. We partnered with 2 hospitals, and at the launch ceremony, I read a line from Eleanor's last letter. Some truths are harder to say aloud, but they are what free us. At home, Alyssa and I found rhythm, uneven at first, then surprisingly smooth. We set boundaries. We shared wine. We avoided the landmines of childhood memory until we didn't have to anymore. One evening, she said softly, Do you ever wonder what they're doing now? Sometimes, I admitted, but it doesn't sting anymore. How did you do that? I stopped expecting them to be something they never were. Alyssa nodded slowly. I'm still working on that part. It takes time, I said, and you don't have to do it alone. One Sunday after brunch, Mark leaned back in his chair, watching Naomi and Alyssa bicker about dessert. You've built a fortress here, he said to me. No, I corrected gently. I've built a family, a chosen one. Weeks later, a letter arrived, this time from Douglas's new attorney. Douglas had died of a heart attack, and in his will, buried under boilerplate estate directives, was a single handwritten clause. To Rachel Carter, I leave no object, but a truth I failed to speak. She was always my daughter. I just never knew how to love her. I sat with that line for hours. It didn't undo anything. It didn't restore what was taken, but it was something. A last whisper of accountability, a posthumous surrender. I didn't cry, but I didn't burn it either. That night, I stepped onto the porch Eleanor and I had once shared, hot tea in hand. Fireflies danced in the hedges. Somewhere, a dog barked in the distance. Alyssa joined me a few minutes later. Room for one more? I nodded, patting the seat beside me. We sat in silence. Then she asked, "Do you think we'll ever stop talking about them?" "No," I said, "but one day I think they'll stop mattering." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're stronger than you've ever been." I looked out into the darkness. I had to be. They gave me no choice but to save myself. And I did. Not by proving anything to them, but by letting go of needing them to see me at all. If you've ever chosen peace over proving yourself, type 4. Sometimes walking away is the loudest truth.